Proverbs. And the book of Proverbs is primarily composed by Solomon. There are technically 6 chapters of Solomon's Proverbs that are specifically said that they are compiled by Hezekiah's men. So if you'll recall, Hezekiah is king about 150 years after Solomon, maybe even a little more than that. At the next time that Judah had a real turn back to the Lord. And so some of Hezekiah's men then went in and collected together some of Solomon's Proverbs that were apparently not in the original. And then the other thing is that there are 2 chapters that are written by someone other than Solomon, or that are named someone other than Solomon. One is a guy by the name of Agur, and the other one is Lemuel. Lemuel is the one who writes chapter 31, the story about a wife. However, there are some scholars that believe that Agur and Lemuel are pseudonyms for Solomon. That it's actually Solomon, but he had written it in another name. Not the most Christian example, but if you've ever heard of Richard Bachman, he's actually Stephen King. He used a fake name to write a couple of his books that didn't fit with his style as Stephen King, but it's still him. He just wrote it under a pseudonym. And so there are some scholars that believe that's what happened in Proverbs, but we don't know that for sure. That does help us, though, on the dating. All of Solomon's Proverbs would have had to have been written during the life of Solomon, which would be from about 900 BC to about 930 BC. 990 BC to 930 BC. Remember, it goes backwards. BC counts down. And then the final edit would have been somewhere around 700 BC during the reign of Hezekiah. Almost certainly the book is done by then. The primary purpose for Proverbs is he is writing to young men and to wise men in Israel. Okay, when we get into it, you will find several times this kind of discussion about young men, listen to your father's instruction. It's clear that some of who he's talking to are younger members of the Jewish community, telling them to behave is part of this. I'm sharing my wisdom with the next generation. Remember that Solomon is the wisest man in history, is the idea. Now, it did not help him not do some really dumb things. But remember that he asked God for the ability to be wise in the way he managed Israel. And we see throughout the Kings and Chronicles, we see this wisdom of Solomon that God gave him, this spirit of wisdom. And so Proverbs is not untheological, but it is far more practical than some of the other books. You will see a lot of things even in here that go, well, wait a minute. I thought God said we weren't supposed to do that, because he does make a comment at one time. He goes, look, the person who cheats sometimes prospers. Well, to be wise, that's true. Doesn't mean that's what God wants you to do, but so this is really a discussion of wisdom, and it is its own kind of type of literature in this time frame, this wisdom literature, or almost like philosophy. Learning to be wise, learning to be okay. The theme of it is, of course, sharing wisdom. Obviously, if that's what he's doing, that's the theme of the whole book, is sharing his wisdom. The key verse here is found in the first chapter. Let the wise hear and increase in learning, and the one who understands obtain guidance. That's Proverbs 1, verse 5. Okay. If we were to put it into sections, Chapters 1 through 9 will be father to son wisdom. So it's parental wisdom. Chapters 10 through 22 are specifically just kind of random proverbs of Solomon. There is some collecting of them, but really it's just a set of proverbs. Chapter 23 and 24 are kind of common wisdom. Then 25 through 29 comes back to another set of proverbs from Solomon. And then the very last two chapters are the wisdom from Agur and Lemuel. Okay. So those are kind of the sections that we deal with. So let's look at the book. We won't go through all of these, but I want you to see some of this. So chapter 1, verse 1 says, the Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel. Okay. He starts out this way: to know wisdom and instruction, to understand words of insight, to receive instruction in wise dealing, in righteousness, justice, and equity, to give prudence to the simple, knowledge and discretion to the youth. Let the wise hear and increase in learning, and the one who understands obtain guidance. To understand a proverb and a saying, the words of the wise and their riddles. And then verse 7, I'm going to be fair. The book gave verse 5 as kind of central verse, but I think verse 7 also fits in this discussion. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. Okay. Now, we need to take a moment here and understand once again the discussion that we got into a little bit in Psalms about Hebrew poetry. Proverbs is a very well-established example of kind of how Hebrews did poetry. Okay. So there are kind of three ways that you rhyme meaning in Hebrew poetry. Okay. The first line and the second line could be opposite. Okay. So now watch. This is an example of this. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. So the beginning of knowledge is to fear the Lord. But a fool despises wisdom and instruction. So do you see how they contrast with each other? The wise person fears the Lord. That's the beginning of his wisdom. But a fool despises instruction.
Still true today.
Yes. Okay. And you'll see lots of examples of that where it goes in and says, this is true, but this is also true. And they contradict each other. So the wise man does this, the foolish man does this. In fact, not in like a couplet like we have here, but we see it in Jesus's, right? The wise man builds his house on a rock. The foolish man builds his house on the sand. And notice the contrast. The one who hears these words of mine and does them is like a wise man who builds his house on the rock. The one who hears these words and does not do them is like a foolish man who builds his house on sand. And the two sections, from a meaning standpoint, actually rhyme. A lot of the same words. If you really look very closely at Jesus's discussion there, the one who hears these words of mine, both of them start with that. And then there's a contrast, and does them or and does not do them. Is like and then we have the two opposites of men who built their house on, and then we have the opposite things. Then the same thing happens to each one. The storm comes, the rain falls, the wind blows. And what do we see? We see an opposing result. The wise man's house stands because it's on the rock. The foolish man's house falls because it's on sand. But there is a poetic design to it in the Hebrew culture because of the way the meanings interact. Okay, verse 8 gives us another example. Hear, my son, your father's instruction, and forsake not your mother's teaching. So now watch. These two agree with each other. Hear your father's instruction. Don't forsake your mother's teaching. So notice how now we have father and mother, but they are the same discussion. Listen to your parents. Hear your father's instruction. Don't forsake your mother's teaching.
Still applies.
For they are a graceful garland around for your head and pendants for your neck. So they're like jewelry to you. A garland would have been like a headband, and a pendant for your neck, a jewel for your neck. They're valuable. My son, if sinners entice you, don't consent. So now we have another picture that we have a conditional. If this happens, here's how you should respond. If sinners entice you, don't consent. Then on the same front, we have this kind of agreement. If they say, come with us, let us lie in wait for blood. Let us ambush the innocent without reason. Notice the two are basically the same, two statements saying the same thing. So what do you think the poetic purpose of that would be? To have them say the same thing.
Reinforcing.
To reinforce. So notice, what is he doing in poetic language? This is doubly important. See, and particularly verse 8. Hear, my son, your father's instruction. Don't forsake your mother's teaching. He doubles up. Okay.
I like that he uses instruction and teaching.
So then the next few verses just go on, 11 through 14, talk about these wicked men that he's not to consent to. See, let us swallow them like the grave. We'll find all their stuff. We'll fill our houses with plunder. And then suddenly in 15, notice, my son, do not walk in the way with them. Hold back your foot from their path. So we double up again. Don't walk with them. Keep your feet away from the path they're walking. Why? And then he goes back into who they are and what God is going to do to them. Okay. Then when we get to verse 20, we shift out of that and we have, once again, notice, wisdom cries aloud in the street. In the market, she raises her voice. Okay. Is this almost, well, not even almost, this personification of wisdom, making wisdom look like a person? Okay. Now, the interesting thing is when we look at, I laugh about this. In the Old Testament, when we see wisdom described as a person, it's always a she. And in fact, even in Greek, the word, the name that connects to wisdom is Sophia. But this is the idea. Now, watch how Solomon is handling this. Wisdom is crying out for you to listen to her. And then notice the cry. Verse 22 gives us the cry. It's so much fun. How long, O simple ones, will you love being simple? How long will scoffers delight in their scoffing and fools hate knowledge? If you turn at my reproof, behold, I will pour out my spirit to you, and I will make my words known to you. Now, notice that some of this sounds very much like God speaking, but in this case, what Solomon is getting at is that this is wisdom speaking. If you'll turn when I tell you to stop, I will show you what wisdom is. Now, here's the important aside to this that we need to make sure we understand. God is the author of all wisdom. And just because the psalmist and and Solomon in the Proverbs and all of that discuss wisdom as female does not mean that this is not God speaking. Because God is the beginning. Remember, fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. You are wise when you listen to the Lord. And so, in a way, when we look this call of wisdom, it is much like the call of the Lord. In fact, we see so many similarities. Because I have called, this verse 24, because I have called and you refused to listen, have stretched out my hand and no one is heeded, because you've ignored all my counsel and would have none of my reproof. So notice now we have 4 times they repeat it. I called, you didn't listen. I stretched out my hand and you didn't heed. I gave counsel and you ignored me. I tried to reprove you, but you wouldn't listen. He said the same thing 4 times. I tried to tell you and you ignored me. So then we have another set of 4. Actually, it's 5 this time. I will also laugh at your calamity. I will mock when terror strikes you. When terror strikes you like a storm, and your calamity comes like a whirlwind. When distress and anguish come upon you. So because of, and these 4, that you didn't listen when I tried to tell you to do better, when the results of what you did come, I'm not going to help you. You are going to get what you are going to reap, what you sowed. Can you see in this a father trying to tell his son how to succeed? That is very much these first few chapters. It's the voice of a father going, counsel is coming to you and wants to help you make wise decisions. We want to help you make the decisions that are going to benefit you and not hurt you. But if you don't obey them, then it's not going to go well. Okay? And then, by the way, we have in verse 28, and once again, think of this, that God says this later when we've been looking in Jeremiah. We see God make these exact same statements. Then they will call upon me, but I will not answer. They will seek me diligently, but they will not find me. Because they hated knowledge and did not choose the fear of the Lord. So if we're taking it under the discussion of wisdom, here it is. I've offered you wisdom and you've denied to take it. I've offered you knowledge and you've decided not to listen. When there comes a point where you're desperate and you're desperate for wisdom and you're going to call out, I need wisdom, it's going to be too late. Okay? You would have none of my counsel. You despised all my reproof. Therefore they shall eat the fruit of their way. They'll receive what they earned. Okay? Chapter 2 continues this. Okay? My son, notice once again, father's instruction. If you receive my words, treasure up my commandments with you, making your ear attentive to wisdom and inclining your heart to understanding. Yes, if you call out for insight and raise your voice for understanding, if you seek it like silver and search for it as a hidden treasure, then you will understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. For the Lord gives wisdom. From his mouth come knowledge and understanding. So now watch the picture. My son, if you will receive what I tell you and treasure up my commandments, then what you'll do is you'll hunt for wisdom. I think of it this way. You'll seek it like your car keys when you lose them. You will diligently hunt to find them. Search for it like hidden treasure. You'll mine for wisdom. You'll hunt for wisdom. You'll dig for wisdom. You'll seek after wisdom. Then the Lord will give it to you. Okay? Then we come in and we find, other kind of discussions on this that are father-son type of things. Discretion will watch over you, understanding will guard you, delivering you from the way of evil, from men of perverted speech. And then suddenly in verse 16, it's clearly a teenage son, because so you will be delivered from the forbidden woman, from the adulteress with her smooth words, who forsakes the companion of her youth and forgets her covenant of God, for her house sinks down to death and her past to the departed. So it will protect you from chasing after what's going to hurt you. In this case, he uses the discussion of a woman, but that's not all of it. It's the forbidden that is probably more important here. The temptation that comes. Okay. If you'll walk in wisdom, if you'll walk in the commands of the Lord, he will deliver you from this. He will guide you not to follow that. Now, understand, this works both directions, and it's less about a member of the opposite gender, and it's more about the idea of that which entices you to sin, whatever it might be. In this case, he uses woman. This is one of those fun moments where maybe Solomon should have practiced what he preached. Now, the question then becomes, is this at the end of Solomon's life as he realizes all the mistakes he's made and going, boy, I hope you don't go through the same stuff I did? Or is this before he fell into all of that? We really don't know. But if we're to be honest, this is exactly where Solomon's fall comes, is in this enticement. Okay. Chapter 3 then talks about trusting God. One of the kind of most important verses in the entire book fall in at verse 5 and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your paths straight. Do you want the path to be clear? Then trust in the Lord and let him guide you. Notice it doesn't say they'll be easy. It just says they'll be straight. Okay. Talks about honoring the Lord. Then in verse 13, blessed is the one who finds wisdom. So we're back to this discussion of how precious wisdom is. Notice, for the gain from her, this is verse 14, for the gain from her is better than the gain from silver, and her profit better than gold. She is more precious than jewels, and nothing you desire can compare to her. Okay. Speaking of wisdom from the Lord. And then in verse 19, the Lord by wisdom founded the earth. By understanding, he established the heavens. And then in verse 21, my son, do not lose sight of these. Okay. Now, when we get to verse 27, we get a little more practical. It says, "Do not withhold good from those to whom it is due, when it is in your power to do it." So if you have the power to do good for someone who needs it, don't wait. Then here's this one practical. Don't say to your neighbor, "Go and come again tomorrow, I will give it," if you have it with you. So you borrowed something and, "Hey, can I have it back?" "I'll give it to you tomorrow," when you have it on your person. No, give it to him then. Don't plan evil against your neighbor. Don't contend with a man for no reason when he has done you no harm. Okay. So we see practical stuff. Okay. Chapter 4 then goes in and once again to this, "Don't forsake my teachings." Get wisdom, get insight, verse 5. Okay. Verse 7, "The beginning of wisdom is this: get wisdom, and whatever you get insight. Prize her highly." Okay. So notice the very important element here of son, be wise. Son, don't forget wisdom. Okay. Then in chapter 5, we move into this discussion of adultery. "My son, be attentive to my wisdom. Incline your ear to my understanding, that you may keep discretion, and your lips may guard knowledge. For the lips of a forbidden woman drip honey, and her speech is smoother than oil, but in the end she is bitter as wormwood, sharp as a two-edged sword. Her feet go down to death. Her steps follow the path of Sheol. She does not ponder the path of life. Her ways wander, and she does not know it." The idea is, and there's no other way really to explain it, he's speaking of, in a way, the prostitute. She's seductive. She tries to charm you to come to bed with her. But what you're actually going to get is destruction. So in a way, it's be smart on who you choose. Now, once again, in this case, we're speaking male to female, but it works both directions. Okay. Once again, although at the same time, Solomon didn't do very well at this. Once we know his story.
And he knows it.
Oh, yeah. By the way, verse 15 and 16 is still talking about that. "Drink water from your own cistern. Flowing water from your own well." So this sounds weird to say it this way, but what is he saying? Stick to your own wife. Don't go chasing water from someone else's well. In context, we know that is the discussion here. That while he's speaking of cisterns and all of that, what he's really saying is, don't go chasing what's not yours. And we know that because in verse 18 he goes on, "Let your fountain be blessed, and rejoice in the wife of your youth, a lovely deer, a graceful doe. Let her breasts fill you at all times with delight." So there is really a discussion here of, hey, son, when you get married, find joy in the one who you married. And don't go looking for greener grass. Right? We have that old axiom, the grass is always greener on the other side of the fence. No, it's not. We may think it is, but it's not. There really is this discussion. And notice verse 20 comes back to it. Why should you be intoxicated, my son, with a forbidden woman, with a woman who's not yours, and embrace the bosom of an adulteress? Enjoy your own spouse. So now in chapter 6, we get to more practical things. Okay. We actually start up with something that we saw in James. My son, if you have put up security for your neighbor and have given your pledge for a stranger, so if you've taken out, if you've helped them, if you're snared in the words of your mouth, caught in the words of your mouth, then do this, my son, and save yourself. Okay, so watch, what you say matters. Go to the ant, O sluggard, consider her ways and be wise. So be busy, don't be lazy. Notice, without having any chief officer or ruler, she prepares her bread in summer and gathers her food of her harvest. How long will you lie there, O lazy person? When will you arise from your sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come upon you like a robber. If you're unwilling to do anything to prepare, then it's going to get bad. Verse 16 comes into this. There are 6 things that the Lord hates, 7 that are abomination to him: haughty eyes, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that make haste to run to evil, a false witness who breathes out lies, and one who sows discord among brothers. So what are they? Well, pride, dishonesty, hands that shed innocent blood, so murder, a heart that devises wicked plans, so planning evil, people that run to wickedness, a false witness, one who lies to get someone else in trouble, and one who sows discord. So what does that mean? Oh, you should have heard what so-and-so said about you. Right? We all probably had that person at school that would tell everybody, oh, so-and-so said something and blah, 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 whether they did or not. To start what? To start a fight. Well, that's it. Then we come back to adultery. Clearly, that's an issue. Okay. Then we go on. Chapter 8 comes back to the call of wisdom and the blessing that comes from wisdom. Okay. Then in chapter 9, we have the way of wisdom. Wisdom has built her house. She has hewn her 7 pillars. She has slaughtered her beasts and mixed her wine, and she has set her table. So come eat. Then at the end of 9, we have the way of folly. Verse 17 and 18 are interesting. Stolen water is sweet, and bread eaten in secret is pleasant. But he does not know that the dead are there and that her guests are in the depths of the grave. Sure fun for a little bit, right? Think of the prodigal son. What did he do? He went out and he went and did all these things, and they were all really, really fun until what? Until the money ran out. That's what Solomon is getting at. Okay, then we move into just general proverbs. We're not going to read a lot of them. I'm going to bring up a few. The first one is: a wise son makes a glad father, but a foolish son is a sorrow to his mother. Notice the contrast. The wise makes a glad parent. The foolish makes a sad parent. Okay. Verse 11 does the same thing. The mouth of a righteous is a fountain of life, but the mouth of the wicked conceals violence. Okay. Chapter 11, verse 1, a false balance is an abomination to the Lord, but a just weight is his delight. So what is he talking about? He's talking about whenever you're measuring out grain or whatever. If your balance is fair, then you delight the Lord. But if you're cheating them, see? So they're words of wisdom. They're somewhat generic. Sometimes they flow for a few that are together, but occasionally you'll have one that's just kind of a general statement. But a lot of these fall into that category where the wise do one thing, the fool does another. So Solomon is trying to show them, hey, choose the wise way. We want you to choose the wise way. Okay. As we go through, and like I said, I'm not going to read all these. I would encourage you to go through and read this again. The book we were looking at actually mentions the fact that if you will take and start and read one proverb, one full chapter of Proverbs a day, you'll be done in 1 month. In fact, there are exactly 31. So you could go your whole year and just do, every first of the month you read Proverbs 1, Proverbs 2, Proverbs 3, Proverbs 4, and go through. And there is value in that. I will mention to you what I mentioned while we were at Psalms, that Psalms is a very spiritual book about praise and worship. Proverbs is a practical book about life. And they are both very, very valuable in our spiritual life, which is one of the major reasons I think that so many, I don't know how many of you had one of these. How many of you had a Bible at some point that said the New Testament and Psalms and Proverbs?
Yeah.
Because the Psalms are worship, the Proverbs are practical advice. Now, are those the only books in the Old Testament you ought to read? No. But they are incredibly valuable in our lives. Okay. Just because of time, we're going to move to the end. I do want to bring up the last couple of chapters. Actually, particularly chapter 31. This one is, notice it says, chapter 31 begins with the words of King Lemuel, an oracle that his mother taught him. Okay. Do we know for sure who that is? If it's Solomon, then mother was Bathsheba. But understand, even if these are other people, it's something that the collector of the Proverbs felt was important enough to include, even whether they're the words of Solomon or not. Okay, what are you doing? This is his mother. Do not give your strength to women, your ways to those who would destroy kings. It is not for kings to drink wine or for rulers to take strong drink, lest they drink and forget what has been decreed and pervert the rights of the afflicted. Give strong drink to one who is perishing and wine to those in bitter distress. So this is a very interesting discussion here, because King Lemuel had his mother tell him, be careful what women you deal with and stay away from wine and strong drink. And then suddenly, this is still part of this. In verse 10, he goes, now let me tell you what you should be looking for in a woman. Because verse 10 through the end of the chapter is the example of a good wife. An excellent wife who can find, she is far more precious than jewels. The heart of her husband trusts in her, and he will have no lack of gain. She does him good and not harm all the days of her life. She seeks wool and flax and works with willing hands. So she's busy. She makes sure they're clothed. She makes sure they have what they need. She is like the ships of the merchant. She brings her food from afar. So she is good at, she provides. Now, I want you to remember, because this is a very interesting dynamic here. Because the culture of the day said that women were subservient, right? If we were being fair, the man was in charge and the woman was quote unquote less. But that is not what King Lemuel was taught by his mother. Because these verses say this: if you choose wisely, your wife will be your greatest treasure. That is really what this is saying. It is a mother telling her son, be careful and make sure to choose wisely, because if you choose wisely, your wife will be the greatest asset you have in your life. She will make sure that she will make sure that that provision comes. She will help to take care of you. It doesn't mean that you have no responsibility, but she will be your partner in all of this. And notice some of the things that it mentioned are things that you wouldn't think of in that culture for a woman. It says she considers a field and buys it. She knows the value of real estate. She plants a vineyard and she's strong. Her arms are strong. She knows how to make a profit and to sell at a profit. She works late into the evening. She helps those who are in need. And her house is never worried about the winter coming early because everything's been done to prepare. Now, I want to be completely fair. I don't know that there are any of us who would completely fill this out. But notice, and this is why I come back to bring this up. Notice that in that here, and really when we get into Song of Solomon as well, there is clearly a discussion here of the value of a wise choice of a wife or husband. And particularly this idea that working together, they can survive anything. See, she's not afraid of the snow because she's taking care of everything. Her clothing is fine linen and purple. Her husband is known in the gates, and when he sends among the elders of the land, this is the idea. He is well known because, in a way, I think they're all jealous. But also, he is able to focus on those things that are his responsibility because she's supporting him. But notice, she makes linen garments and sells them, and she delivers sashes to the merchant. Strength and dignity are her clothing, and she laughs at the time to come. She's wise. She's kind. She looks after her husband. She's not idle. Her children bless her. Her husband praises her. And notice the praise that comes. I know there's a lot of great women, but you're the best. And then it closes with this: charm is deceitful and beauty is vain. What is he saying? It's great for a girl to be pretty, but those things go away eventually. But a woman who fears the Lord is greatly to be praised. Now I got to disagree with him slightly because Michelle's prettier now than she was when I married her. But the truth of the matter is, those things change. And so, what is Lemuel's mother saying? Don't just choose her because she's pretty. Choose her because there's something underneath that. A woman who fears the Lord should be praised. And let her works praise her. There is a real discussion here about this. If you've got a spouse who loves the Lord and who fears the Lord, you ought to brag on her. Let her works praise her. Look, her children call her blessed. Her husband praises her. He brags on her. Solomon really didn't do well in all of this. Certainly on the woman discussion. Of course, neither did his dad. David and Solomon both really blew it when it came to women. If you really read. But in these practical deals, how many times does it come up? Hey, be careful. Choose wisely. All right. We're going to stop there. We will pick up at Song of Solomon in 2 weeks. What? Oh, sorry. Ecclesiastes next time. Sorry. We are not skipping a book. I was thinking the order was opposite.
I just happened to be looking at it. So I do. That's next week.
Yes. No, 2 weeks. We won't have Bible study next week.
That's it. Must have a hash. Yeah.